Now, in its earliest days, higher education was largely aimed at educating the elite of early American society. The curriculum was based on the classical seven liberal arts, and much of what students learned was rooted in religious, moral, philosophical, and classical thinking. The elective system, which was championed by Eliot at Harvard, was not in full effect until the late 1880s. Therefore, the classical curriculum ruled from approximately 1636 to the 1880s. It is with the land-grant universities that the priorities and conditions of higher education started to shift. Institutions began to be more responsive to the needs of local constituents and began to move beyond the teaching of the classical curriculum. The new institutions were concerned with improving the everyday lives of the local and common citizens. In responding to concerns, these new institutions responded to the pressing problems of their communities. The answers to these problems found solutions through empirical investigation and research. How do we make water potable? How do we keep food from spoiling? How do we provide sanitation in big cities? As the 20th century began to unfold, major research universities emerged. Universities began offering graduate education, especially doctoral education, and placed research at the core of the university experience. That is, as the years went by, graduate education defined the primary mission of graduate training institutions. Yale offered the first PhD in 1861, which was consciously imitating the German degree. However, the first formal graduate school with an organization and mission devoted to advanced study was Johns Hopkins University, founded in 1876. Johns Hopkins was based on the two German notions. One, related to students, was the idea of Lernfreiheit, or freedom to learn. The other notion was related to faculty. It was the idea of Lehrfreiheit, or freedom to teach. By early 1900s, the current structure was in place. It featured a high degree of decentralization and rivalry among institutions, housed a growing research structure, and graduate education with firm links to undergraduate education. Now, the department on campus that was affected the most by the emphasis on research and graduate education was the library. Academic libraries had to support both the teaching and research agenda of their universities. This meant a greatly expanded collection, which required an increase in funding. As research grew, knowledge grew. Not only were new books being published, but whole new fields of study were being created. This meant the libraries had to spend even more time and money developing a research collection, at great expense to the university. The time period from 1945 to 1975 is often considered the golden age of higher education in America. The GI Bill greatly expanded college to soldiers returning from World War II. The government invested a lot of money in research, especially research that supported defense and space programs. And towards the end of this era, student protests and demonstrations increased on campus. Student demonstrations were not new on campus, and the reasons for the demonstrations were mostly the same: practicality of education, ignoring student needs and demands, and access to higher education. Now, this era's demonstrations also included social problems like war, racism, and the university's involvement in defense research. By the mid-1970s, the landscape of higher education had changed again. Enrollment was stagnant, and less money was coming from the federal and state governments. Around this time, technology began to expand, and academic libraries were expected to keep up. At first, this was microfilm and microtext. Phones and typewriters have been around for many decades. And then it became computers, computer files, the internet, digital files, ebooks, and the list goes on and on. Now, while this explosion of technology and information has been great for teaching, learning, and access to information, it also comes at a steep monetary cost that libraries and their universities find increasingly difficult to meet. Now, this class will discuss in depth the current state of academic libraries and how many things have changed and many have stayed the same. Now, before I end this video, I want to mention these videos only really talked about private and state universities in general. But within those two broad categories are a number of types of colleges, including, but not limited to, liberal arts colleges, church-affiliated colleges and universities, military colleges, women's colleges, historically black colleges and universities and predominantly black institutions, Hispanic serving institutions, American Indian colleges, and for-profit colleges. Now, all of these have their own libraries with their own unique challenges and opportunities.